Thank you all for coming. It's great to see such a nice group here today. This is a great opportunity just to get together, especially for the third years who are not together in any classes in their bodies this year. They're doing one online. And so a nice opportunity to get together and also to be in the Macintosh Gallery and have access to what is an amazing gallery, a resource, that I think that we can all sort of be proud of, but also that there's a lot to learn from. So I want to introduce James Patton, who's the director-curator, and Heather Wakely is from Student Success, or is it Student Experience?
Student Experience, I'll explain the name change. Yeah, that's great, thank you.
And Barb was going to introduce you, but anyway, since it seems like you're both here now, I am saying these are the folks who are going to present to us for a while, and then we'll have some pizza. And do you want questions as you go along? Or?
Yeah, I think if that's all right, I'd like to make this really informal. It's an opportunity for you to think about your careers in relation to the cultural industries. How many of you have thought about working in cultural industries? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe? Yeah, 8, maybe? Well, I'm hoping that you'll all want to work in cultural industries by the time I'm done speaking to you tonight. So by cultural industries, just for a point of definition, I'm really referring to the public sector, public institutions. There's a lot of different art worlds that you'll discover, that range from very small community-based groups that do their own thing remotely, in a remote context away from everybody else. And then there's international art communities, but there's a range of art communities. So I never presume to speak for all the cultural industries, but I'm talking about public museums, public orchestras, theaters, public theaters, things that are funded publicly and are not for profit in general. So that's the industries we're talking about. My talk is going to be largely about museums because that's the field I'm most comfortable in. But the basic sort of understandings of organizational structures and how to position yourself in relation to those structures is basically the same in many respects. It's not about so much the knowledge of music or the knowledge of art or the knowledge of theater. What I want to talk about is the structures and the opportunities that exist in the cultural sector. So what jobs do you think exist in a museum? What comes to mind? Or any cultural institution, yeah?
Educator.
Educator, that's a really good one. Education department, yeah. Any others? Yeah.
Collections management.
Collections management, yeah. Any others?
Curators.
Curators, that's the one most people think of first because those are that's the most fashionable and most desirable sort of glamorous profession in the museum world right now. Yes?
Marketing.
Marketing, a huge opportunities in marketing. Yes?
Sponsorship and dealing with
Exactly.
paid for or advocate for the arts.
Right. So there's in one sense there's two broad ways of thinking about things. I'm going to sit down for now. There's two broad ways of thinking about it. There's sort of cultural producers, content providers, and that would include like curators, artists, writers, people that actually make content that is then distributed through the museum system. And then there are the administrative side that supports the creation and dissemination of that information. So there's really two things going on in a museum at any one time. Museums and all cultural institutions are very, very good at hiding the apparatuses that support them. So as a viewer, you've all been to cultural organizations, whether it's Stratford or a museum. The goal is to create an experience that disassociates itself from all practical concerns. So when you go in and you see an exhibition, you're not going to see the transportation that went behind it, or the framing, or all those things that go behind an exhibition, which can take 2 to 3 years to organize and mount and get up. The idea is to create a magical experience where you walk in and have sort of an unmediated relationship with whatever cultural content you're seeing, right? So because of that, because we're so good at hiding what we do, people are often unaware of, just how these institutions are structured. So here's a question for you. Are public institutions publicly owned? Who owns them? You've been to the Arca of Ontario, right? Who owns it? No? They're actually private corporations. They're privately run corporations, not-for-profit corporations, but they have their own governance, their own bylaws, and their own internal governing system with usually a board of directors. But they are autonomous. So, well, we think of government being involved in these organizations as funders. The government doesn't actually run most cultural institutions. There's some that they do, I have to say. But most are run on the model of a charitable corporation. So one of the questions I think that's important to ask if you want to work in one is how is the power structured within that organization? And this is another thing that it's public knowledge. It's all available to you, but we don't often talk about it or see it. So how are publicly, I've sort of alluded to it already, who runs a museum? Yeah?
Board of directors?
Yeah, the board of directors. And, that's a volunteer position, usually between 12 and 20 people. And they're drawn from various parts of the community for expertise. And they're sort of in charge of the governance side of things and checks and balances on what's going on. They don't, however, control the content, right? That's who controls the actual content of the museum. Who picks what goes up or what gets on? Yeah?
Curators, researchers, collections management?
Right. It's mainly a curatorial function to determine the programming and education to determine the programming under the executive director who sort of monitors that and makes sure that it's all in balance. Someone else mentioned development. That's a huge area that is often not looked upon as a career choice. It's a really hard career. Fundraising is probably one of the hardest things you can do, but it's also very rewarding. So what else do we think of in terms of development? What would go under the development department? Yeah?
Like public relations or public outreach?
True. Usually communications is related to development because you want your messaging to all coincide. And development and communications are often joined together. Even within development, though, what kind of roles are there in development? Fundraising is the obvious one. Going out and getting money. Any others? I think someone mentioned it over here. Corporate sponsorships. So there's many different roles that you can have within the development portfolio. You can be solely in charge of corporate sponsorship. You can be involved in membership. You can be involved in fundraising in various capacities. Events are a whole other way, planning events. So there's a whole range, even within development, there's a whole range of positions that are available to you. And quite often if you're thinking about a career in the cultural industries, it's good to have a knowledge of content and curatorial and whatever the area is, but it's also good to have backup expertise because so often who gets hired is the person that has some experience in development, some experience in finance, these other sort of para-museum functions. They're very attractive when you're being hired. So try to cultivate those things if you can. So you have extra expertise in communications or expertise in finance. Any other areas of the museum did you see the organizational chart I sent out as a link? Yeah? Did anyone get that? Did anyone have any comments on it? No? Okay, so so much for the organizational chart. I find those things fascinating, and I'm fascinated by how little I know. I think that's, I always thought I knew all the positions in a museum, and then if you start going through those organizational charts, you come across things that are just like, what's this? And they change. I mean, technology, digital technologies has dramatically changed how museums run in the past 20 years. We have whole new departments in communications that are about social media and about online presence and websites, and collections management has all gone digital too. So the people that have those skills, who have experience with databases, something I really am not fond of. But people who have experience managing big databases are great for museum work in terms of collections management. And similarly with social media, those kind of things are always in demand at museums because the audience is being developed that way now. So I found a book when I was doing my research for this, and it's kind of funny. It's a definitive study of your future in museums. And this is probably dated from the 70s. And it has a whole list of questions at the back to see if you're suitable for a chosen field. And it's really quite funny to see what they were sort of thinking about in the 60s, but a lot of it hasn't really changed. So we've sort of generally covered the range of positions that are available. And there's always more new ones, as I said. But how can you sort of position yourself to take advantage of museum jobs or jobs in the cultural sectors? Has any of you tried to break in? Yeah.
Networking.
Networking is pretty key. It's probably more important in cultural industries than any other industry. Because if you think about a business that makes things, a manufacturing industry, there's very tangible assets, right? They make cars, and the cars sell. And success is measured on the number of cars that they sell, right? It's pretty straightforward. We don't have tangible assets. We have the collection, but our product is intangible, right? It's culture. It's not something you can really measure the impact of. We try to with things like attendance and impact studies and things like that. But really, it's an intangible thing. And it's based upon a lot of intangible relationships. And so the only way to sort of jump in is by networking and making contacts. And I can't stress that enough. It's a very small world, the cultural industry field in Canada. I mean, it's really, probably a few thousand people, if you count everything. It's like a small town, maybe 10,000 people, if you count all the museums and cultural centers and theaters. It's not a big community. So you will meet those people again and again, right? You're going to meet people, you're going to run into each other. I've worked in several provinces, and I've met people, sort of coming and going in Winnipeg that I knew in London. It's really small, and so you want to develop these contacts and networking. Of course, everyone says that in every how to get a job thing, but it's really, really important in this field. How would you go about networking in relation to a cultural industry? Yeah.
I mean, I know in my own personal experience, I've worked multiple entry-level jobs in museums. I mean, then you get kind of access to more like managerial people that are like your managers, and so creating contacts and references with them is usually not too difficult in that sense.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a couple of things you can do. Certainly, volunteering and working short-term gigs in museum is the best way to get in, and that's what I did. I worked in several, maternity leave, small positions, summer jobs, internships. Because you really do get insight very, very quickly. And if you're useful and asking the right questions, mentoring is very, very easy in these industries because we're all excited to see someone new come in because it's kind of a rare field for someone to get into. And the money is terrible. I mean, I have to tell you that you're not going into you're not going into the cultural industries for the salary. I mean, that's very, very rare that people make a lot of money. There's very few positions. But the benefits, I think, outweigh the remuneration in that you develop really sincere collegial contacts that you work with throughout your career. You develop these really sustaining relationships. And the relationships, like I said, that go across the country. So if you do work in cultural industries, you can pretty much go to any place in Canada and have people in your field that you can call and go out with for dinner. That's just a given. And there's a lot of support. People are always glad to see you. So there is this community that's very, very sustaining. However, you're not going to make a lot of money. So, art gets conflated with money somehow, and everyone thinks everything's worth a whole lot of money in terms of the value of works of art, but it doesn't translate into the pay scales of cultural work.
I have a question, James.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about, in a way, theaters and museums have a certain amount in common in terms of a kind of infrastructure, but a lot of these folks may be interested in, say, writing,
Right.
publishing. And so I was thinking, well, what would be some of the analogs in publishing? I mean, it might be the publishing houses. And at the same time, when we look around, there's so many awards and that sort of thing. So do you think it would be at the level of awards and the kind of public infrastructure that these things would be analogous? Or
Yeah, it's different because it doesn't, writing doesn't have a physical home like a museum or a theater, or, it's more, transmuted through society than that. But there's more, I think there's a lot of opportunities for writing right now because of the growth of the internet, and there's so many opportunities for writers to get stuff published. And I was speaking to someone at Poetry London. I think, I'm not really familiar with what organizations would work for that, but certainly others writers group like Poetry London would be a natural for me. And I met a woman there. I don't think she's in SASAH, but she's a young student who's just published in the Toronto Star and the Globe and Mail, and she just started sending things out to the papers. So I think confidence is one of the things I wanted to talk about, is having the confidence to see yourself in these roles. And I think in my case it was just blind stupidity confidence that I went in because I didn't know any better and sort of figured it out. But if you have a certain amount of confidence and you can convey that you are serious about being in the arts, people pick up on that immediately and start helping you and providing you information. As I said, we've had people show up here to volunteer, and a good example is Lucas Cabral, who is from visual arts. Started out as a volunteer, got a part-time job here doing communications and social media, and then went on to a full-time job in Oshawa, and now is the director of a small gallery in Windsor, Ontario. And he's 26, 27. But he made it very clear that he wanted to be here. I mean, he was in for whatever we were going to ask him to do, and he wanted to learn more. So certainly all those, you mentioned, interning, showing up, all those things are really important. The other thing is to be a member of the community. And this is more diffused again. A lot of these things seem kind of ambiguous, right? There's no LSAT test to take. But if you start going to cultural events and participating, on their volunteer committees, or there's youth councils, there's all sorts of things, ways you can get involved. But just showing up, for example, at gallery openings, the first time I went to gallery openings a lot, I dreaded it. You go into this room and everyone's an expert, and no one speaks to you the first time, and it's like, this is really awful. Why am I here? By the fourth time you go, everyone will know your name. And it's just this transition from being an outsider to an insider, and it happens quite quickly for people that actually do show up and make it clear that they are interested. So you sort of have to give interest to get interest in this field. And there's a lot of people also do internships and get involved in museums and then transfer to other fields. So it's not like a dead end, right? If you do communications or development in a gallery context, you might end up somewhere totally different from your connections that you make. Because cultural organizations are networked and connected in so many ways that are not readily apparent, right? Because of the board members, because of the donors, because of the connections to City Hall or to the Ontario government, to the Ontario Arts Council. These are all the sort of stakeholders that are behind what you're seeing as an organization, and they're all hiring too. So it's not uncommon for someone to go from running a theater to being at the Canada Council and running the theater program at the granting agency. So, the galleries or the cultural institutions actually provide a gateway to a lot of other careers in government and in agencies. Yeah. Any questions so far? No? If you're not, okay, for the people that said they don't want to work in cultural institutions, what do you want to do? I'm just curious. As SASAH students. You're not career motivated? It doesn't matter, you can tell me. I mean, no? No one wants to give it up? Do you want to be creators? Is that what's going on here? You all want to be content creators. Yes, please.
I'd like eventually to be a published novelist.
A published novelist, great. That's great. Yeah.
I'd like to go into like translation, so I guess that could go into like museums like that, but like eventually like spend translation long term.
That's great. Yeah. Actually, it's I mentioned all these connections. We have to submit our Canada Council grant, which is a huge document in both languages now. So we're always scrambling for translators. It's a really, French, English?
Yeah, and Greek and Italian.
Oh, wow. That's great. Yeah, very, very useful career. And you would? Yeah, I know. We pay those bills. But, devil's advocate, if you worked in a museum or in a cultural institution, that would help you gain so much in terms of connections and profile, or could potentially, that would also help you in your career. We get a lot of lawyers like to join museum boards and get involved with the volunteering because they make other connections in the community. Any other career aspirations here? Yeah.
I'd like to do art direction for a fashion house.
Wow. Yeah. There's as I said, there's a lot of crossover. That's a pretty exciting field to work in. But I think again, I'll say that the skills that you would learn in a institution would definitely help you, and is highly recognized within other professions. That you have done an internship at a gallery or something. Always really enhances your resume. Anyone else? No? Yes.
I am interested in working in arts and culture, but if I didn't, I'm interested in either going to law school or working in social enterprise.
Again, there's a whole world of cultural, legal cultural practices, and there's a few lawyers in Canada that are really known for their representation of cultural institutions and culture and artists. So there's even if you did have this law career, you could actually represent artists and organizations and enjoy all that has to give you. So there's ways of crossover through a lot of professions. Anything else? You can always contact us, me, our curator, when you have questions about jobs or roles within the cultural industries, and we're always glad to talk. So if you feel more comfortable individually, please do.
Thanks so much, Jane.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
I would just add that, some of you know Josh Landier and others who work on Words Festival. And that's, I think, a good example of something that has grown out of London, partly out of this faculty. And there's lots of crossovers between the presentation of writing and writers and museums and contexts for that to happen in. So certainly, I think that the kind of thing that Jane is talking about is highly transferable in terms of the kind of world some of you are hoping to work in.
For example, I'm thinking about it now. There's all these really fascinating small publishers. What's the one in Windsor? Biblioasis? That are publishing really, really fabulous novels, and it's very, very small. So, to work in that environment, you get a lot, if you were a writer, you'd get a lot of input from other writers and industry know-how that wouldn't be apparent to you if you weren't. So, yeah, there's a lot of opportunities in those fields, and journalism. Yeah.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Heather Rakeley. As I said, I work within student experience within the department that just went through a renaming to Careers and Experience. We used to be part of the Student Success Center. You may have access for different programming or resources. So what used to be the Student Success Center last fall split into two departments. One of those departments is Careers and Experience. So within our department, we have Experiential Learning, the group that I lead, Career Education, and Employer Relations. And so we're located on the second floor, where Student Success was, the second floor of the UCC. So if you haven't been in this space before, I hope that you'll come before you graduate or come back and visit us after. So that's who I am. So I just have a few quick messages, and I don't want to, we have so much in common. I hope as well that you'll consider careers in the arts and culture. But I guess my thesis also would be that your options are limitless. That's where I hope you'll think that way, because I know that it would result in a really meaningful, career and life. But I believe so strongly in the skills you're developing through this program and just the limitless opportunities available to you. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I know that you met some of my colleagues through the online components of the course. So you've heard from Emily, who works with me in experiential learning, about experiential learning. You've heard from Kelly about community engaged learning. Have they heard from Monica at this point?
No, next year.
Okay. So coming up, you're going to hear from Monica and Shnezana and Jen on themes like resume writing, interview skills, LinkedIn. So I'm glad to be here tonight sort of on behalf of the group in person to say hello. But career education has been so thoughtfully embedded throughout the course. So you'll hear from those colleagues as well. Experiential learning itself, as you guys have probably experienced, is a growing priority at Western. So it's existed in different programs, for decades. But the conversation has really ramped up over the last few years as far as defining when it's happening, sort of identifying it, and then figuring out how we're going to expand experiential learning at Western. So we're not going to be a Waterloo, we're not going to be a co-op school, so what is sort of our identity at Western in experiential learning? So for us, it's really about choice. I think we pride ourselves in that. So like so many things at Western, the benefit of being at a large institution with so much variety is that you can choose, and you guys have that within your program itself, as far as the way that you want to gain experience and what you want experience to look like and what the right timing is for you. And then support. So again, this program is a fantastic example of what we would wish for all students, where you have tremendous support within your program. And then centrally, on our team, we want to support you with those experiences and career transitions as well. So what is experiential learning? And I know some of you have already had experiences through the coursework and then getting outside of the classroom. And then for some of you, that's still upcoming. That's true? Yeah. So what is experiential learning? What do we mean when we say that? Because we say it a lot lately, but sometimes we don't pause to say, what is it? So that's getting that work experience or simulated work experience as part of your degree. It's about making sure that you have supervision or mentorship throughout the experience, that you're reflecting on the skills you're developing throughout the experience, and learning to articulate the skills at the end, right? We know that when students engage in experiential learning, it really helps you thrive during your degree, but also beyond. You develop connections, you build your resumes, you explore careers, and you'll have many of them. So I think it's great to hear sort of what your thoughts are now, and be okay that there might be a few steps in between, or that you might start that and decide that you want to have a few other careers afterwards. What did he say? Building your networks, building your portfolios. It sounds like for many of you, you're developing portfolios through this program. I think I've said all the things that I wanted to there. It's about the experience itself, but then the transitions as well. And so not just this first one, and we know that the experiences you're having will set you up well for that first transition, but also developing those career management skills so that you can navigate those future transitions as well. How are you guys feeling confident about that at this point? Do you feel like you're developing the networking skills to do that? That's great. So I would just encourage you to take advantage of all of the opportunities. I would add, James shared some great examples of building your network and sort of being mindful of those transferable skills that you're developing. I would add, engaging with organizations on social media in a positive way and sort of creating relationships that way. What else did I want to share with you? Oh, just that the team so you through the online portion of the program, you're meeting some of the experiential learning colleagues, the career education colleagues, the group that you're not meeting with and that are typically behind the scenes in that way are the employer relations colleagues on our team. So the people that are out in industry and promoting Western students and encouraging organizations to recruit here. And so I would just share on their behalf what I hear from them, which is that graduates with a liberal arts background are more in demand than ever. We know that employers want the communication, collaboration, critical thinking skills that you're developing. And we're seeing through the recruitment processes and in the job postings that they're prioritizing and sort of highlighting those more than ever. So I think you made a fantastic decision. And again, I think the opportunities are limitless. We also hear from employers that we read through, reports and labor market information, how much careers and the landscape is changing, right? We know that like 50% of occupations will go through a huge skills shift or makeover in the next 10 years. So a lot about what we talk about in our department is about, preparing for careers that don't even exist yet. So we think often less about career titles, but more about what challenges might you want to solve. What really excites you that way. And then you can think about who's working in that space or who's connected to those challenges. So I really encourage you to think that way as well. We talk a lot about meaningful careers, but also building a meaningful life. That's something that that really is the foundation of our work. So I think that's mostly what I wanted to share. I just really wanted to, again, put a face to the Careers and Experience team, and thank you for inviting me in to do that, and again, for embedding experiential learning and career education throughout. We're located on the second floor. There's lots of resources online as well, and the team, we support not just current students, but alumni. So I hope that you'll come in and meet us, and whether it's through the program or beyond, just know that we're here to support you, and would love to meet you. So I'll stick around and chat one-on-one. If you have any questions right now, be happy to answer them, but I don't want to stand in the way of pizza.
Pizza's here.
It's arrived.
You made me think of something that I forgot to mention, which is the demographic shift in, you must be all aware that people my age are getting old and retiring out. And this is huge right now in the cultural sector. People tend to stay in their jobs for a long time, and there's been 3 retirements in public art galleries in southern Ontario, or the southern part of Ontario, in the past 2 weeks. It's really good. There's going to be a critical shortage of cultural workers, because those industries are expanding too, with tourism and an aging economy, aging population that wants to visit museums and values it. There's going to be a lot of job opportunities, so don't count it out in your planning.
James and Kevin for coming and for letting us come here. Actually, you gave us some great information, and I think you've really reinforced the choices these guys have made. I can see, I looked as they were talking, I was thinking of all of you and thinking, ooh, that would work for you, and that would work for you. So I think that you guys are doing the right things. You're making some great choices, and I think there's a great opportunity for networking. If you haven't started yet, tonight's a really good night to start. So thank you again, and this was lovely. We'll do this again. Okay.
Thanks, Barb. Actually, I will maybe add one more thing. In the last few years, we've had the McKinsey and Company, which is an international business marketing training company. They've come in and worked with the 4th years. And this year, we're hoping to actually open it up to 3rd and 4th year. And seeing this number of people in the room from 3rd year tells me, you know, there are a lot of you around. And so we will try and schedule that at a time, it will be in the new year, but we'll try and schedule it at a time that would work for as many of you as possible. Because I think, you know, that's another, I want to call it free opportunity to hear from another type of person in the wider world of work. And this is part of what we want to do, is make sure you hear from professionals such as James, you know, in the cultural sector, and people in the business sector, because there are so many choices. We want you to you know, have all the information. So that's my little plug. We will keep in touch on that.
Great.
So, thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure. Let's see.